just watched that Tom Hanks movie, which is called Greyhound, I think. Really good. Have you ever seen the movie Sully with Tom Hanks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Really great movie. And it was kind of relatable because it had to do with an airline and airplanes and stuff like that. You kind of think that because he's the captain of a ship that this would kind of feel like you could get into that same groove. Only problem is he acted very well. Only problem is if you're not in any form of military or navy, you're gonna probably feel like it's gonna go like right over your head. It's just so much navy talk, like consistently navy talk. It's like, oh, okay. Should I have brought my manual to this movie? You know, like, I mean, he starts mentioning like port side 7315, 7623. I mean, it's like constant naval talk, and you're like, all right, what? Oh, I mean, I didn't come prepared. I wasn't prepared for the movie, so. I mean, if Google Translate had naval translation, it would have made it more interesting. But literally, I couldn't make it. I was just like, okay, good acting, but that was about it. This is really interesting. Good stuff, man. Well, we got a few questions today. We're going to be talking about the topic today. We're going to be talking about a little bit of owner financing. I had a few questions even come in today from Sarah, and also a few questions last week that came in. It was an email that came in about the topic of owner financing. But to kick it off, have you ever bought on an owner finance, and have you ever sold on an owner finance, and what's been your experience?
Yeah, I've done some creative owner financing deals with sellers. Just a lot of times on fix and flip, sometimes different techniques of trying to make it work. I'm not a big fan of what they call the sandwich wraparound type owner financing, where I'm financing from the seller and then I finance it with my buyer. It's just, that gives me a headache. Yeah. A lot of people do it. A lot of people are successful at it. Yeah. A lot of people specialize at it. Just not my cup of tea. Most of my owner financing comes in on the sell side of my deal. With my buyers, I'll do some owner financing deals with them, depending on if it's a house or land, how we structure it. But yeah, we'll do them. I like it because what I like about owner financing, the biggest thing, Nathan, I really like about owner financing is the fact that if you get enough deals going, you don't have to constantly be chasing that next deal. Like, I'm at the beach, I'm working a little bit here at the beach, but not really a lot. So if you send me an email, I promise I'm checking my emails, but just not near as much as normal. Like
the other email I just sent you earlier today.
Yeah.
Wondering why it's making up.
Yeah. So just but you know, if I don't do a deal this week or next week, it's not the end of the world, because I got owner finance deals coming in.
Right. Yeah. And that makes sense. So it's like the difference between getting like chunks of cash and then passive income, passive residual. And so, yeah, that's a good point. Now, let me ask you about, obviously you've sold. I know you've sold a bunch on creative financing and owner financing. So what was kind of like your first experience about that? Like, there's a lot of like questions in regards to this, like, how do I do it? How do I, talk to the seller to get them convince them to sell it to me on owner financing? But also on the other side is, how do I sell it with payments? Let's start with the first side, with the seller side.
Well, usually the reason that you may go into a seller finance side, where you're buying it from the seller, is because the seller's not willing to take a I hate to say low ball offer, but that's what it is, a lower offer on their property. They want to get more money. Well, I can give you more money if I'm financing it out. Let's say, if it's costing me, let's say I'm gonna give you $650 a month, and it's going to increase what I can pay you by maybe 15 grand, 20 grand, whatever it may be, and then I turn around and finance it at $1,000 a month. I've got $350 positive cash flow every month.
Yeah. So that can, I like that part where you said you can offer the seller more money, right? You can offer the seller more money. So a lot of people might be hesitant of that. Like, oh, wait, why am I giving them more money? I'm supposed to be getting properties at a discount. Why would someone do that, though? Why would you offer a seller more money for the deal?
Well, and that's a really good question, because when I'm doing that, I'm also always thinking, what's my exit strategy? Whether it's owner finance or not, you're always thinking, what are my exit strategies on this property? If I'm going to offer more money, it's probably going to be because my exit strategy is going to be, I'm going to market it more towards an owner finance deal for my end buyer. Okay. Doesn't mean if somebody comes along with cash and really likes the property and they want to buy it for that particular price or close to it, that I wouldn't do it. But more than likely, it's going to be an owner finance deal on the back end as well. Okay. And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, so what kind of terms do you usually do? That's one of the questions that comes up here on the sell side. But either way, whether it's on the buy side or on the sell side, what kind of terms do you typically like to do?
So let's flip it a little bit, and on the sell side, on my sell side, an ideal situation is that, let's say I paid $10,000 for a piece of property, selling it for $40,000. Let's just say. Okay. I would ideally love to get $10,000 to $15,000 down, at least 10, because I want to cover what I've got into it. Yeah. That way, I'm positively cash flowing moving forward. Right. That's a key thing. People always ask me. Here's a question that comes up. Well, if you can't get that, how far do you want to operate in the red? Me, my rule of thumb, if it's a smaller deal, 6 months at best. If it's some big, large deal that's going to really work out in the long run, year maybe, I'm greedy. I like to get my money back pretty quick.
Right. When you say 6 months, there's something you said there. When you said 6 months, what do you mean by that part?
So let's say they are going to offer me, I want $10,000 down, but they're saying, oh, Mike, I can only give you $8,000 down, but I'm going to pay you $500 a month, let's say. Well, within 4 months, I'm going to be at the $10,000 mark. So within that 6 month goal of mine, I'm at $10,000. Actually, in 6 months, I'm going to be $1,000 to the good at that 6 month point.
I see what you're saying. So you give yourself 6 months to get back to break even. Is that another way to say it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's the only time you'll go red on a deal. Exactly. Yeah, and 6 months till break even point. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So now what about, I know you said on the sell side you do, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Did you say 10 years?
No. Are you talking about as terms, as how long the deal is? Yeah. Okay, that's another thing that comes, like how long do I own or finance it? Right. My big thing is, I ask people, and we touched on this a little bit last week, I don't like putting in numbers in my ads. How much can you put down? How much can you comfortably afford a month? If you can put that $8,000 down and you can comfortably afford $1,000 a month, then it's not going to be long. But let's say you can only do $250 a month. Your term is going to be extended out because you're not paying as much monthly, but interest and all that, it's actually going to make me a little bit more money in the long run. Yeah. Well, and that's such a great point, because I've gotten this so many times when I was doing a bunch of owner financing on houses. And that was one thing. And there's people out there that will talk about how to do owner financing and put the down payment in the ads. I personally never liked that, because I always felt like I was limiting how much down payment they were going to put down. Because like you said last week, if they have, $5,000 down, or let's just say $10,000, and you put on whether it's your sign or your ad or your post, and you only put $5,000, guess what they're going to say? $5,000 down. That's what's in their mind, right? And so one of the things I found, and again, this is on the house side, is when I was doing a lot of owner financing on the house side, I was never stating, the down payment. I would just ask them, well, how much do you have to put down? And I think that's a very solid question. It doesn't matter if it's houses, land, multi-units. It doesn't matter. How much do you have to put down? Whenever you're doing creative financing, it's how much you have to put down, so you can gauge, you can hear what they have, how much to put down, and then you can say, okay, from that amount, you know what your strike price is, and you can say, okay, I can figure and work my numbers from there. I can put them into
this type of term on the back end. How far do you typically like to go? Because I keep saying 10 years, but I'd like to know, maybe, is there a certain time frame that you like? Or
I like to keep mine 5 years or so.
Okay.
But if it's a large deal, 10 years, 15 years. I've had one at 15 or 16 years before.
Yeah.
The older I get, the less, I'm only 15 or 20. Because I was at the end of it. But yeah, and another thing to point out in this also is, Nathan, that when somebody tells you, well, I can only put $6,000 down, negotiate with them. You can squeeze maybe more money out of them in their down payment or monthly. That's another good way to use your interest rate to your side. Okay, well, you can only put $6,000 down. Well, your interest rate is going to be whatever percent, 12%. If you can put down another another $4,000, then I can bring your interest rate down another 2%. Almost like buying down points in the real mortgage world.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. Another thing I used to do with potential buyers is I would actually give them funding sources. Send them to websites. Like if they only had $5,000 down and I wanted to get them to 15 or 20, I would actually send them to sites to actually, and of course I also accepted credit cards, but I would send them to websites to get short-term funding, personal funding, such as like prosper.com, lendingclub.com, fundingcircle.com. There's a lot of sites out there that will give unsecured credit lines up to $40,000 unsecured.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I was looking for more of a down payment, then I would send them to those websites and say, hey, I have an alternative solution for you that can help you put more money down, that we could bring down your rate, so on and so forth. And that worked out really well and while I was doing it. Now, I have another question that said, interest rates. Let's talk a little bit about interest rates on maybe, I don't know, the buy and sell side. We could talk about both.
If I'm buying it, I want a really, really low interest rate.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm selling it, I want a really, really high.
And that's today's lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Buy low, sell high.
Yeah.
One important thing is check with your state. Every state is a little different.
That's very true.
In what they let you cap your percentage rates at. Some states are a little lower than others. I know here in South Carolina, I don't know how it is now, but I know at one point I knew this one guy. He actually there was a mobile home park down here back in the day. Some people may or may not have seen it. It was like a TV show. It was like a redneck TV show. But this guy, I knew him because he was an investor, and I actually went down while they were filming one day.
Oh, really?
We were talking real estate stuff, and he actually, I said, man, what do you charge interest rate on a mobile home? He was getting 22%, Nathan, interest on mobile.
Wow.
And he could do it at the time in the state. I don't know
Yeah,
what
at
it
the
is.
time, probably.
But, he was making a killing. Some people say, "Oh, I can't believe probably 8% is probably my lowest."
Yeah.
My ballpark is somewhere between 10 and 12.
Yeah.
People say, "Well, that's ridiculously high with what interest rates are now." You're exactly right. It is high. Feel free to go get some of those low interest rates for houses or whatever
Right.
you're buying from me. But
Absolutely.
if I'm the only show in town, I'm not trying to gouge you, but this is a business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tying up my capital that could be used for something else down the road. So yeah, and it's a risk to me too. So
Yeah.
I want to be risk versus reward. I've got to be compensated for my risk also in the deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing too. That question does come up. People will say, well, why is your rate so high? Right? Why? Well, especially now, right? We're in a unique situation where rates are even lower. Well, the thing is, this is a unique type. Typically, it's a unique type of property. First of all, banks don't like to lend on land unless there's a construction loan going on and they're building a house. So if you're just buying recreational, it's a high risk asset. Okay, asset. Right. So that's the reason for the higher interest rate, because it's higher risk. That's what I would tell these people. They say, oh, well, how come your interest rate is over, typically we would start at 12%. Okay. And then what we would do is we'd do buying down the rate. We'd get, would go down the more money they could put down and buy down rate. So we typically end up on the low end 8%, on the high end 11%. That's pretty much where it would end up. But the reality is, when they would ask that question of why is your interest rates higher than 5%, right, than the banks were at the time, or 4.5, and I would say, listen, if you can go get a lender for these types of properties, go right ahead. That'd be great. I could probably give you a few references, but they don't lend too often on these types of properties. So it's a higher risk type of property for the commercial lending. Therefore, it's a higher risk for me. That's what I tell them. And once you just say that, higher risk, and I always like to compare to credit cards in that kind of situation too. I say, listen, I may be a little bit more expensive than the bank, but at least I'm not as expensive as a credit card. I'm basically more than 50%, I'm about 60% cheaper than a credit card. And I always relate it to something a lot higher. Most credit cards are over 20, 25, 30% typically. So I like to kind of give them a balance, like, hey, I'm higher than the conventional bank. Your property is high risk. It's not a conventional type of property. And, this is not a credit card loan. So it kind of puts me right in the middle, like, hey, I'm still trying to help you out, in which I am. The reality is, like you said it best, that, yeah, my money, my capital is out there, and I want to make sure I get it back. It's that simple.
Right. And also, I'm not putting you through the hurdles that a bank does. I don't need your firstborn child and a pint of blood. You know what I'm saying?
That's really true, too. That's very true.
Here's a question I get. 2 questions I get a lot. Number 1, well, do you run a credit report? 9 times out of 10, I don't.
Yeah.
I think that I'm a pretty good judge of character.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, this year I've been wrong some. But overall, I'm a pretty good judge of character. So I talk to people and fill them out, and you can kind of tell how genuine somebody is. I mean, if you're telling me, I'm at minimum wage and I'm living in a $1,200 a month studio apartment, and I still won't buy this from you. Well, you probably can't afford it.
Yeah.
But that's one thing. So I generally don't run a credit report. Mm-hmm. The other thing is work history. Do you get a work history? I don't get a formal work history. I may ask them in our conversations. Hey, where you work? I see the reason why people want that, and they won't wrap their mind. And maybe someday I may get burned and change my mind. But quite frankly, I've not had major issues come up.
That's good. That's good. I have actually 2 stories in regards to that. Like, for example, this one guy, and I used to do a bunch of like military housing for either leasing for military veterans or active duty, and also for housing, convert them also to a purchase. But I'll tell you a situation. I didn't pull credit. This gentleman told me that he had a foreclosure 7 to 8 years prior. And he said, listen, you can pull my credit, but I'm going to tell you right now, I have a foreclosure on there. And I said, okay, well, tell me about that. Tell me what happened. He said, well, whatever the story was, this and this happened, and I had to let it go. And I said, okay. He said, but listen, I also have another house that I bought from my mother-in-law that I'm making payments on, and I'm paying for her, and she pays us half the mortgage. So I was like, okay. He gave me the address. I said, send me the address. I just want to confirm you're on title. It was true. He was on title. So I said, okay. Saw the purchase date and everything. Like, okay. The guy's active military. So I said, you know what? No problem. So I did that transaction. It's still paying. He didn't want to do, now, Mike, I typically do 20-year deals. Most people think, whoa, Nathan, why are you doing 20-year terms? Personally, the longer the term, the more interest you make. But some people, okay, well, not some people, but keep in mind, when you have a longer term, if you're going to sell the note, it's harder to sell on a longer term. So like Mike said earlier, if you're selling a note 5-10 years, that's the sweet spot right there. 5 to 10 years is that sweet spot if you're going to turn around and sell the note, or if you want to recoup your capital quickly. Well, this guy told me, he said, Nathan, I want to keep this at 7 years. I was like, oh, I was like, I don't want to do 7 years. But so yeah, he did it. It was at 7 years. But that one didn't pull a credit report on him. I just confirmed that other property. Now I have another couple in South Carolina that I did pull credit and I did pull work history. And unfortunately, I don't know if they got split up or divorced. All I know is my asset manager, this is a funny story. My asset manager called me and said, Nathan, borrower 72772, whatever the number is, right? He says, I just had the funniest call in my entire, career. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I was listening to the borrower and in the background, I heard two women fighting about whose man he was. Like,
oh
he's
my
not,
God.
Yeah, that's my man. That's your man. Right. And they were going back and forth. He said, Nathan, that was the most funniest call. And I'm like, well, what was the other person's name? What was the other woman's name? And what was the other woman's name? Because he heard names going back and forth. And I said, oh no, that one was the wife. I don't know who the other girl is. He's like, man, that must have been a girlfriend because he was saying, I heard her and he was saying, stop beating my girlfriend. I'm like, what is going on? Yeah, it was very interesting. But unfortunately, they ended up, They ended up separating. I think he just got up and left and didn't pay anything, something like that. I mean, it was just a horror story. Anyway, long story short, we ended up settling, and they just moved out of the property. This was actually before COVID, the end of 2019, and they ended up just moving out of the property. And instead of going through the foreclosure process, even though we did have to do, a proceeding. So something with the, I don't know, husband and wife, they got separated. They didn't want a divorce because of paperwork and money and all that stuff. So they ended up figuring it out, but we ended up selling that property just in the beginning of February, I think it was, the beginning of February. But that was a situation where, we did pull credit, good work history and all that, but all of a sudden, they had personal girlfriend issues, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you bring up another good point in that issue that, a lot of people tell me, I don't want to have to go foreclose on a property. I don't have to foreclose on a property. In your situation, you didn't have to do that.
Right.
Communicate with your buyers.
Yeah.
Communicate with them and try to work something out. 9 times out of 10, you work something out. Maybe they need a couple months, suspended on their payments.
Yeah.
Just tack them to the end. Or in this case, they just sign everything back to you, sign whatever document they need to, and they walk away. You're keeping the money you made on it, and they're just walking away from it. And it didn't cost you thousands of dollars to go hire a foreclosure attorney.
Yeah, that's very true and honestly, I have people who every year they default November to February every year. It's clockwork. It's literally clockwork. And the reality is they catch up, but $400 and something later in late fees, they catch up. Yeah. It's incredible. I'm like, this is like every year. Like, hello, it's Christmas. I'm like, listen,
it's coming.
It's like I would stop believing in Santa Claus just to save over 400. I can tell you, I can go back and look at I think it's February, March statement. All of a sudden, I see like over $400 in late fees every year from one household. If you times
that much more money you're making on that property.
Exactly. And times that by 4 or 5 of them, because there's a few of them that do that every year. I'm like, God dang, won't you just stop like buying gifts? Like, I'm saying I don't mind. You can buy your gifts, but Send
me a gift of your payment at Christmas.
Right, yeah. It's crazy. Anyway, it's just how it is. Sometimes them habits are harder to break out of. All right. So one of the last questions here, we've answered like 6 that have come in already, but here is one more. What is the closing process like for the owner financing deal? I assume I go through an attorney to buy it. What do I do to sell it? So you're the master of self-closes, not me. I've never done one, don't want to. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So it depends on the amount of the deal. I will say this. Let's look at houses first. In a house deal, 90% of the time, I'm going to go through an attorney and let an attorney do a deed and everything and record a lien on the property. It just works out better that way. Now, land, it's a little different. I may do that if they're needing to do something with it, but most of the time, land stays in my name, and I can owner finance that, and it keeps in my name. So that's the two main ways. One thing to remember when you are owner financing, especially if it's staying in my name, I tell them, they say the biggest thing I get is, well, what about, how do I know that I'm going to own the property at the end? Well, you've got a contract with me, and it says that in item whatever. That's what I call the sue clause. If I don't give you the property, you can sue me.
Right.
But a couple things people need to remember is there's other expenses, especially if you're holding the property, or even if it's a deal where the property's going in another person's name. Think of your mortgage escrow on your house. There's escrow things in there. Taxes is one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if taxes on the property is $600 a year, you need to be pulling that $50 a month in addition to their principal and interest payment needs to be for taxes.
True.
If it's homeowners insurance, whatever, if it's home, they can choose that if they want to because it's in their name. But I encourage them to either escrow it in and I'll pay it for them, or send me a declaration showing that you have insurance on the house.
Okay.
Insurance. If it's land and it's going to be in my name, or if it's house and it's in my name, I will definitely pull out the insurance on it. And lastly, another big thing is, and this is where you and I differ, Nathan. Yeah. I finance a lot of my own, or I handle a lot of my own loans.
Yeah.
You don't.
No.
But at the same time, I still charge like a $20, $25 loan processing fee each month, because if I come to your side of the deal and decide not to do anymore, it's already built into my loan.
Yeah.
I'm not going to collect that extra $25 a month. It's going to have to go to my loan processing company, but it doesn't affect their pay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too. One of the things I wanted to just circle back around, just to clear that up, that when you're doing it on a land deal, owner finance, you do that on a land contract. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, yes, yeah. I just wanted to make that clear. That's a land contract. And then the other one is security deed. So you're doing a deed in trust. And that's something that, most people can kind of get a little, worried or confused about, or I'm not sure which paperwork to use, right? It's okay. Like Mike said, I would just counsel, get with your lawyer. Now, if you're doing a self-close, just talk to Mike, because Mike can.
Well, and now we can even mix it up a little bit more for him, Nathan. What about lease options?
Okay.
Talk about lease options.
Do you want to add that to the mix?
I do. Well, and the reason I do, I got a really cool story on a lease option deal. And it was, it actually wasn't my deal. It was actually my wife's deal.
Okay.
I have to say that in case she's around here somewhere.
That's my deal.
So it's a very unique situation. So she had a house. Obviously, before we got married, I had a house. She had a house. Uh-huh. She and then I bought a house, a new house when we got married, and she had hers. And so obviously she wanted me to handle selling it, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so I got a unique situation with this guy that says, hey, I really like to have the house. It's, kind of general area I want to be in. Had some issues. Long story short, he owned a company. His wife got very sick, didn't die, almost died, but he lost everything. He lost his business. He lost his house, which ironically is in the same neighborhood as the house where I live now. It's in our neighborhood.
Okay.
Which made it even that much more special.
Okay.
And it's like, my wife and I was like, man, we got to help this guy. I mean, he came from this house. He's going to this house. And, his story is just, it just kind of pulled us.
Yeah.
So, long story short, we worked with him. And he said, I want to work with a program. I got to get my credit repaired, but it's going to take me some time. I said, I understand. So, long story short, we wrote up a lease option. I'll get into what the mechanics of that here in a minute.
Sure.
But one of the things that I had him do as one of the requirements was enroll into a credit repair program.
Okay.
Not that he was just crazy and didn't pay his bills. He truly needed help to clean up some of the stuff that he just was collateral damage.
Yeah.
And he did that, and it did help. Long story short, my wife wasn't really keen about it. She wanted the cash up front. So, but I had to explain, in this lease option, it makes more money for you, or in our case, for us.
Yeah.
For example, I think his payment was maybe $1,000 a month.
Okay.
He put down X number of dollars for the house, which we were good with.
Okay.
And he could pay $1,000 a month. And he actually took care of the taxes on top of this. This was principal, this was his payment. So after that, we actually took and out of the $1,000, $150 a month or so, $100 a month maybe, came out toward the principal. So basically, if he paid $100,000 for the house, every year or every month he paid $100 came off that price he owed. So
okay.
6 months into it is $99,000.
Yeah.
$600 or whatever, $400. So that led to that, and it's all on paper.
Yeah.
Long story short, we had it that way for a year. So he thought that in a year he could do it. Well, a year came up, and just because of the way things was, he needed longer to do it. So I said, you know what? Let's redo the option. I'll give you another year to do it. I told my wife, I said, you're getting paid every month. The house payment was being made, and she was banking probably $300-400 a month on top of it.
Right.
And I told her, I said, think about this. Your house payment's getting made, and you're making bank $400 or $500
Yeah.
a month here.
Yeah. Let it ride.
Let it ride. So at $500 a month that we're making on top of that, each year that was $6,000 additional dollars we were making on that house.
Exactly.
Because we already agreed to the price.
Right.
In the beginning.
Right.
So long story short, after 2 years or right under 2 years, he was able to get out of his name. We got paid off the rest of what the loan was. His credit's repaired. He's loving where he's at. April's loving that he paid off the house. Yeah. And I mean, it was a win-win for everybody. We were able to help him out. He was able to help us out. I told my wife, I said, it actually helped us tax-wise by, pushing some stuff out a couple years. Yeah. So it's just a really good all-around thing. So lease options is an option as well on properties. If you can buy them yourself and then do the lease option. And really, I mean, think about it. If I'm charging him $1,000 a month, and only $100 in credit, I mean, I don't even know how to figure the interest rate, but it's pretty good, I'm sure. It
definitely is. Just like, I mean, like we were talking about owner financing earlier, right? And lease options gives you that extra money every month. It's the same thing with like creative financing and charging an interest rate. Banks make most of their money on a property, on a mortgage, the first 5 to 7 years. Okay, it's all interest loaded in the front end of the loan. Yep. And that's where the majority of the money is made. So it's just the way it is. It's the way it's set up in the financial system. So the reality is that if you do owner financing, if you do lease options, you can make money. Now there's multiple ways you can do lease options. I know we weren't going to cover like sandwich lease options and all that stuff, but the reality is it's true. You can get paid 3 different ways with lease options. You get paid once upfront, option consideration money, 2 on the monthly payment, and then 3 on the final price. If your price is higher than market or whatever you agreed upon at that time. So Lease options always has that availability. I was doing a bunch of lease options, Mike, in Rhode Island after I started wholesaling houses for a while. I started doing a bunch of lease options, and then the state of Rhode Island actually banned sandwich lease options. Yeah, they banned them. I don't know if they've turned that around since. Gosh, this is like 10 years ago. But they banned that, and they banned going after pre-foreclosures. They banned a few avenues. Yeah, they banned pre-foreclosures because what people were doing, shark investors were taking advantage of people and just, ripping them apart. I mean, they would literally get the homeowner to sign over all the docs and then kick them out a few months later. It was horrible. It got so bad. Yeah, so the state of Rhode Island banned doing pre-foreclosures and sandwich lease options. So yeah, really, really interesting. But it's definitely a great opportunity to make some more money that way,
And one thing to remember also, and I don't want to open this can of worms really, but keep in mind with house and owner financing on houses and things, you do have the Dodd-Frank that's come in effect a few years back. That's changed a little bit. I think that it's may or may not change more. I'm quite frankly not up to date 100% now on it.
I can drop a little bit there, Mike, and give some updates. It hasn't changed a whole bunch, and I think this shouldn't scare people off because there isn't a task team. There isn't money allocated to the smaller investors. There hasn't been. Even when Dodd-Frank came out, it was actually geared more towards bigger lenders, commercial lenders, and all that stuff. What do you call those? Institutional lenders. So nothing really. There was never been a court case of a small-time investor who got their hands slapped or anything like that. But it did put out the law that said you could only do 3 personally in a 12-month rolling period. And you could do more than that if you structured the deal in LLCs. A little bit more on that maybe another time or if someone's really interested. So the reality is you could do it another way. But at this point, especially with the new administration, the Dodd-Frank Act has been rolled back in a lot of areas. So again, there isn't a lot of task force going after this point, especially now with interest rates dropping so low. I don't think it's something that people should get really worked up about because I hear when it first came out, everybody was talking about it like, oh my gosh. And yet there was no court case. There was no fines being given out. It was just all a lot of hype. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to dismiss federal law. I'm just saying that, it wasn't a sweeping through the nation where people were getting fines and slapped with fines, on for it. Right.
And I think you bring up a good point. It's more for the very, very deep pockets. I'm a, minnow in a sea when it comes to that. And I'm not, big fish food for them. So, people got nervous when it initially happened. I was a little nervous initially because nobody knew how they were really going to enforce this.
That's true.
And you summed it up really good. They really haven't that much. Not just an average Joe person.
They haven't exactly. Yeah, they've done it to institutional lenders and stuff, and they've restricted certain programs. But there hasn't been a case. I've searched, I've looked, I went on to different forums, bigger pockets forums. No one. You won't. I don't even think if there is someone, please tell me. But I haven't seen a case come up yet. But heck, man, there was a lot of fear about it, and there still is. So at the end of the day, I'll tell you what. This is what I did. I counseled with my attorneys. I called 3 attorneys. I actually called 15. Okay, for a few different. Yeah. I called a bunch in North Carolina, and out of that, 3 of them gave me great counsel. They're still my attorneys today, and they all said the same thing. They said, listen, don't worry about it. If something comes up and we have issues, we will restructure your deals. Okay. So I felt very comfortable with that, and they're my counsel, so I went with that. At the end of the day, if all hell broke loose, yes, would I be personally responsible? Yes, but I was going off my legal counsel. That's what I decided to do. Yeah, at the end of the day.
Right.
So,
and if you're really, really worried about it, invest in land because it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. If you're really worked up about it, just don't even do it with houses because it really only has to do with people in single-family real estate, residential housing. It doesn't have anything to do with land. So, yeah, exactly. There's the solution. Good stuff, man. All right, well, I think that's all the questions that we've covered. We had quite a few questions come in, and we've covered the questions from the emails. Mike, do you have anything else for this week? I got an air drum roll going on. Air drum roll.
I don't. I know for me, it's going to be a little bit of relaxation. Hopefully.
I know. Like, so when do you start work again?
Well, I'm going to answer some emails later today. We're going over to a neighbor's place after a while, but probably this evening or first thing in the morning, I'll be answering some emails. So if you've got some in my box, I promise you, I'm getting to them tonight or first thing in the morning.
Awesome.
I actually was going to do that. I think I told you before we came on the show. There was a little bit of a little accident on the beach, so it kind of got me sidetracked. So I actually was coming up here to do some email checking, and that just didn't happen.
It was a sign. It was like, no, don't check your email.
Or just get this bag of ice for your foot, and you'll be all right.
Oh my goodness. Oh man. Good stuff, man. All right, well, that sounds good. So, guys, we'll be here same time, same place next week. If you have any questions, if you're watching the replay, just feel free to throw it in the comment section, and we'll get them answered for you throughout the week. Until then, next time, see you.
See y'all.